My name is Maria Estudillo. Today we will be talking about the characteristics of the cognitive load theory and the cognitive theory of multimedia learning. The cognitive load theory is an instructional design theory primarily based on what we know about how the human mind encodes, stores, and modifies information. This theory concerns how we acquire biologically secondary information. This is the type of cultural knowledge that we have not evolved to acquire and must be systematically taught. For example, we learn how to speak our native language by being exposed to it through biologically primary knowledge. By contrast, we learn how to write through secondary knowledge. This is a skill that needs to be taught methodically and cannot be learned by being exposed to it. I see these two types of knowledge as working hand in hand. You cannot learn a secondary knowledge unless you have the primary knowledge to do so. Secondary knowledge has limitations and obstacles due to our cognitive architecture. The focus of this theory is to understand how we process information in our brain. Human cognitive architecture is composed of working memory, long-term memory, and schema. Working memory has a limited capacity and duration to deal with new information. It is limited to 7 plus or minus 2 important pieces of information at one time. Working memory has a limited capacity and duration when dealing with familiar concepts that are already stored in long-term memory. Long-term memory is where knowledge is stored unconsciously and retrieved automatically. Schema is how we organize the information in long-term memory. Schema also helps us recognize information already stored, so when we are presented with new information, we can make connections. For human brain architecture to work correctly, we need to manage the intrinsic load, reduce the extraneous load, and maximize the germane load presented to students. Intrinsic cognitive load is associated with the cognitive effort caused by the complexity of the task or information presented to a student. This load is directly related to what the student already knows, and the only way it can be changed is by modifying the task or by learning more. Also, learning cannot take place when the task exceeds the learner's working memory. The second type of load is extraneous cognitive load. This is the load caused by poor instructional design, where cognitive activities are unnecessary and do not aid in the understanding of new information. The third type, germane cognitive load, this load leads to meaningful learning because working memory is dealing with intrinsic elements rather than elements from extraneous cognitive load. The theory of cognitive theory of multimedia learning is a theory that explains how we construct knowledge from a multimedia presentation that uses words and pictures than a presentation that includes words alone. This is due to the fact that our brain receives and processes information through two separate, non-conflicting channels. This theory uses the sensor modality approach to discriminate between visually presented material and auditory presented material. For example, we process on-screen text and pictures through the visual channel and sound through the auditory channel. Words can be in writing or can be spoken, and pictures can be any form of static or moving images. Can you recognize some similarities between these two theories? The following principles of cognitive load theory are applied in cognitive theory of multimedia learning. Number one, they are based on the same assumptions of human brain architecture. Number two, both theories are used to understand how we learn best. Number three, both mention that learners engage in three types of cognitive load. Next, we will discuss how these two theories are different. One difference is that the cognitive theory of multimedia learning explains how mental models needed for learning are constructed by our sensory memory, and this process is carried out by the dual channels. Another difference is the names of the three types of cognitive load. In cognitive load theory, they are identified as intrinsic, extraneous, and germane. And in the cognitive theory of multimedia learning, they are called extraneous, essential, and generative. Another difference is that the cognitive theory of multimedia learning looks at how we take information, so it includes sensory memory as part of the cognitive process, whereas the cognitive load theory focuses more on how we store information. Finally, the cognitive theory of multimedia learning discusses that in order for meaningful learning to occur in a multimedia environment, the learner must engage in three cognitive processes: selecting relevant words and pictures, organizing them, and integrating them with prior knowledge. Thank you for watching this video, and don't forget to type your questions or leave your comments at the bottom. Goodbye!